Okay, so this video is to explain how to do the visualizing reading log. That's a reading log where you are talking about how your brain created pictures in your head as you read. Now, if this isn't something you do all the time while you're reading, make it a habit. And the way to make it a habit is to pause from time to time when you're reading, stop, and create that picture in your head. Imagine what is going on in the story. What you'll probably end up doing is adding details that aren't actually in the story, which is great. As long as those details you're adding don't conflict with the story or don't go against what the story is saying or aren't like totally inaccurate, like if the story said the character is a blue shirt and you imagine it green. As long as the details are just added, what your brain is doing is making things more real to you in the story, which is a great strategy to use. So we're going to start by taking a look at the requirements of what it means to meet standard for this assignment. So to meet standard for this assignment, I'll zoom in a little bit and we'll clear that ink and get our mouse back. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so we can read the, maybe I'm not. There we go. Okay, let's start by taking a look at what the requirements are to meet standard. This rubric is going to be the same every single time, but I'm going to review it for each one. So what you need to do, you included a summary I can understand in the content of text portion. So that's a summary. This summary should just relate to whatever you're going to do in the strategy. So the summary should tie directly into the strategy. You're not writing a summary about the entire text. You're writing a summary just of that portion of the text that led you to doing this strategy. In this case, summarize the portion of the text that led you to visualize. Beyond that, after you do that summary, you need at least one piece of direct text evidence in your strategy explanation and an explanation of what you did for the strategy and an explanation of how this strategy helped you understand the text. So we'll go down and take a look at how I did that. When you write your summary, you need to write with what we called mature writing voice, which is writing as if your reader hasn't read the story you're reading. And in this case, it's very real because I haven't read the story you're writing about. So when you write, you need to include enough details so I know it's clear that A, you actually read what you're writing about, and B, that you understand the story. So here's my example using The Veldt. I said, in the short story The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. So I start off with author, title, text type. One of the main characters, a father named George Hadley, goes into the children's nursery to investigate. The nursery they go into is they're in their futuristic home and is able to project the thoughts of anyone who walks into it on the walls. So I had to explain all this stuff about the nursery because if I just said nursery, readers aren't going to know what that means. Nurseries make me think of like babies and little things that spin around, hang from the ceiling in cribs, not stuff with lions on the wall. So you got to give details that the thing you're writing about wouldn't make sense to your reader in a kind of common way. The story describes how George sees an African Veldt show up on the walls and how hot it became in the nursery. So I am summarizing this part because this summary directly relates to what I'm going to do over here. So for the strategy explanation, you have a couple questions you need to answer in your writing. First one is, how did you use the strategy? And you need to use at least one quotation in your answer. And then, how did the strategy help you better understand the text? So let's take a look and figure out how we did that. And for this part, I'll give you different colors. So how did you use the strategy in quotation? We'll highlight that in yellow. How did it help you understand the text? We'll highlight that in green. So for the first part, in the text, it describes how George Hadley, the father, felt the perspiration on his brow. So I led off with my quotation. When I visualized this scene in my head, I saw George Hadley as a short man with big, thick black eyebrows, thick black rimmed glasses with a bushy mustache. He was wearing a white button-down shirt with sweat stains in the armpits and red suspenders. His hair was balding from the front, and the top of his forehead was all pink and sweaty. This is my explanation of how I used this strategy. This is me providing lots of details and trying to dig into my brain and think, what did my brain just come up with automatically in order to make that character more real to me? How did I visualize? Now the next part is to describe, so how did that help? how did that help you understand the text? I mean, you visualize it, so yeah, no duh, like it seems a little more real, but how did that really help you with understanding the story? And here's what I thought back on. I thought back on and thought about the fact that visualizing George in this sort of detail made it easier for me to relate to him as a person. It was easier for me to understand how uncomfortable he must have been in the nursery. It also gave me a hint about the nursery being a bad place for him to be in general because he felt so uncomfortable there. So that's my explanation overall of how I use the strategy, I use my quotation, and how that strategy helped me understand the text. You should do the same thing. Think back on what you've read. Think about your thinking. Think about how you have visualized as you've read. Pick one section of the story where it'd be easier for you to recount the thing that you visualized. Think about that, and then think about how did that help you understand the story more.